So action is also referred to as string height, and essentially it's the height of the strings measured at the 12th fret. So you measure the height of the string off of the fret. I'll show you how to do that in a moment. But the way you can change your action is both at the bridge and at the nut. Now here I've got some of the tools that I might use to measure my string height, my action. This video is going to be explaining what action is, not going in depth into what the best action for you particularly is. That was really part of your entire setup, and I've made a video about how to set up your guitar, which will help you decide the exact string height or action that you need. But I will talk about different types of string height and why you might prefer it higher or lower. So essentially all these tools here do the same thing. They measure. They're all made of metal. The three on the side here are referred to as action gauges or rulers gauges or guitar string gauges, depending where you buy them from. They're essentially the same thing, but they're made by different companies. The one at the bottom, the Hosco step gauge, is the most expensive one here. It really allows you to go into more detail than the others in the way it measures. It can measure the height at the nut very easily, and we'll look at that in a moment. But all of them do have markings on, which you can just put against your string or against your nut to measure the height. But you don't need something like that. You could easily just use a ruler. Here I've got a ruler. I use this side, it's all in millimeters, and what I like about it is both sides, both edges of the ruler are in millimeters, so no matter what side you butt up against it, you can read it, as opposed to one of those rulers that has millimeters on one side and inches on the other side. But it is one that has inches on the back if we need it. And in this video I'm going to talk in millimeters, but I'll always put on the screen the equivalent in inches. It's just being British, I've grown up using millimeters. Here I've got a feeler gauge set, and out of that I've taken two of the different feeler gauges, which I would use for measuring the string height at a certain point, which is the first fret of the guitar when you're looking at the nut. Now we'll get into that in a moment. First I want to mention that here on my setup bench I've got my own personal Stratocaster guitar. So these I make to order. You can get in contact if you want one via my website or leave a comment below. So here we are looking at the guitar at the angle where this is the 12th fret. Now normally you do this in your playing position, looking down from above, down from the 6th string down, and you can measure each string individually. Here I'm using a string action gauge, and what we can see is at the 12th fret here, see the lines underneath each of the numbers. These represent millimeters, 1.5, 1.75, 2.0. I can see that this line lines up with 1.25. So this string is currently 1.25 high. Now, when you're checking your string height, you do it, really, it's easy just to do it at the high E and the low E, the top and bottom strings to start with. And a very basic guide is you want your top string, your top E, to be around 1.5 millimeters and the bottom string to be around 2 millimeters off of the fret. I tend to set mine up with the top string being about 1.25 or 1 millimeter, and the bottom string being something like 1.75 millimeters off of the fretboard. So tight in on this angle, we can see that when I turn the Allen key to turn the grubs to raise the saddle, as the saddle raises, the part that the string pivots on or rests on here gets higher as well. So we're raising the string height at this end. Now for most people, when you're changing your action, this is all you need to do. Change the height of your saddles. Let's lower this as far as it will go. See. So with a bit of camera trickery, I'm going to overlay this image of the string touching the saddle at the lowest point it will go to, with the string touching the saddle at the highest point it would go to. And you can see there that there is quite a bit of difference in the string height. So there's a lot of adjustment at the bridge end of the guitar. Now there's no set height the saddle should be when you're measuring the string action. Remember, you measure the string action over at the 12th fret. So here are the two feeler gauges I'm going to use to check the string height at the 1st fret, so coming off of the nut. Now, as with everything that I suggest with setups, it's just a guide. Everybody is going to have their own particular taste, so we use what I say as a guideline, and then you might find further down the line you like your strings, your action a bit higher, or you like your action a bit lower. Now I'm just going to slide this 0.508 millimeters, so just over half a millimeter, under my 6th string here. And what I can see is, it's quite hard to do leaning over the tripod of the camera, but it slides under without really raising the 6th string, which means it's just at the right height. And then on my top E, I've got a slightly thinner gauge, which is 0.457. I can do the same. So what we're going to find is, when you're using the bottom 3 strings, because they're wound strings, you can use the same feeler gauge to measure all of them as a guideline. And for the top 3, you could use the same feeler gauge for them as they're unwound strings, just as a guideline. But really, each nut slot is going to be at a slightly different position. Okay, so let me try and show you with a Hosco step gauge how you might use it. It's got 2 little feet on it, which means it can stand over the 1st fret. And then here it's got measurements. The numbers basically refer to millimeters, so 15 is 1.5 millimeters, 14 is 1.4 millimeters. I've loosened my 6th string. I'm going to pull it out of the nut slot. I can put this on here, and I can move it along until I can gauge the height. This is almost impossible to do with the camera in front of me. So I can feel it pushing up on the feeler gauge. So I know here it's about 1.5 millimeters. 1.5 millimeters. So that's essentially what action is and how you might measure it. Then it's up to you to decide exactly how you want your action set up for your own playing style and for your own individual guitar. So now we've talked about what action is, you really need to think about what the right action for you is. And I've made a whole video about how to set up your guitar, which really focuses in on how to get the right action for your guitar. So if you want to go and look at that, there's a link here. Until next time, happy strumming.